Good morning, readers. It is Miss Coon here today, and I am so excited to read with you this morning. The book we are going to read today is called The Big Cheese, written and illustrated by Kara Atwell. Just in case you haven't heard of Kara Atwell before, I'm going to share a little bit about her with you. So 3 things that I learned about her was that she grew up doodling and writing short stories, and she had this big dream of becoming an author and illustrator one day. So what did she do? She became a teacher, and that's where she began to bounce ideas off of her students, and that is where the inspiration for The Big Cheese came. Before we get reading today, we are going to go over one vocabulary word, and that is scampered. So by a show of hands, how many of you have heard of the word scampered before? Okay, it doesn't look like too many of you have. So scampered is to run, it is to dash, it is to be quick, and it's to move. Scampered is not to stop, it is not to linger, it is not to dilly-dally, and it's not to pause. So readers, I want you to keep a good eye out for this word as we're reading today. All right, let's get started. So The Big Cheese, written and illustrated by Kara Atwell. The Big Cheese. It says, "To my battle buddy, who inspires my imagination and supports my dreams." As a tiny mouse, Baker knew he was living in a big world, barely larger than a jacket button. He couldn't accomplish much as a baby mouse, but he had bigger dreams even then. Every night as he laid his head to rest in his matchbox bed, Baker would stare up at the starry sky. There, floating far above his world, was the largest, most magnificent piece of cheese in the entire universe. Readers, I would like you to stop and think here real quick. What do you think this piece of cheese represents in this book? What do you think it represents for Baker? Okay, I heard a couple of friends say that maybe the cheese represents the moon. That's a very good guess. I heard another reader say that maybe the cheese represents Baker's dreams. Very good thinking. Before falling asleep, he would imagine himself reaching the cheddar in the sky and taking a big bite. Then Baker would drift off into slumber with the image of a belly full of cheese and a smile behind his whiskers. As Baker grew up, he went off to school and learned how to outrun cats, avoid traps, and build a warm nest. He went off to college and became a cleaner. As a cleaner, Baker went around picking up crumbs and scraps from the restaurant near his nest and taking them back to his neighborhood. Look at him in a little graduation hat. How silly. He had a boring job. It was tiring work, running back and forth all the time, and he always came home exhausted. But even though Baker was grown up and had a job, he still dreamed of tasting the big cheese in the sky every night. One day, Baker showed up at the crack in the doorstep of the restaurant and noticed the lights weren't turned on. When he went inside, there was no one there. The place was dark and as silent as a grave. The workers were gone, and no customers were dropping crumbs for him to bring back to his neighborhood. He went home, waiting for the next day. But the next day, the restaurant was dark and empty again. This time, the door and windows had boards over them. There weren't any crumbs for him to collect, and he didn't think there would ever be any more for him here. The restaurant was closed. He had to break the bad news to his neighborhood. They didn't have any food and weren't going to get any soon. For days, they searched in alleys and trash cans, but kept coming up empty without the restaurant to throw out food. They were going to starve. So what message do you think is the author trying to send to readers? What might the theme of this book be? I want you to think silently for a moment. Ooh, I'm hearing some very great answers. I heard the theme could be following your dreams. I think that is very good. One night, Baker lay there in his card box staring up at the big cheese, and an idea came to him. If he could get to that wheel of cheese in the sky, he could bring tons back to save his neighborhood. He decided to get to work straight away the next day. That night, instead of falling asleep dreaming of eating the big cheese, he fell asleep with pictures of rocket ships in his head. He woke up bright and early the next morning, eager to get to work. He scampered, there's our word. He scampered through alleyways and dove into trash cans in search of materials to help build his rocket ship. Under one green dumpster, Baker found an empty can of beans. Later, he discovered an old ice cream cone someone had thrown away after eating all of the ice cream. By the end of the day, Baker had a can for the body of the ship, a cone for the nose, 3 triangle chips for the wings, and a big red button door. Construction took 2 more full days. The cone kept falling off the can, but Baker finally glued it on with a used wad of bubble gum. Gross. He had to chew a hole for the button door to wedge into, and finally the chips were squeezed into small slits made on the side of the ship. All he had left to do was figure out a way to launch himself into outer space. After a little bit of searching on the 4th day, Baker figured out the perfect way. He found a bottle rocket in the trash can behind some old apartments. He decided to go at night when he could easily see the big cheese. Baker climbed up to the roof of the tallest building nearby, dragging his rocket ship with him. It took a lot of energy out of him, but he finally made it. He propped the rocket on the firework and climbed aboard. He had packed an extra bottle rocket inside for the trip home. Baker hung out the door and ignited a match that he dropped on the fireworks wick. Quickly slamming the button closed, he waited with his paws crossed for liftoff. Okay, before we keep going, I want you to turn and talk to your neighbor. Do you think Baker will make it? He built this super cool rocket ship, but do you think he will make it to that big piece of cheese? Great job, readers. All right, keep those thoughts in the back of your mind, and we'll see how this book turns out. A fizzle reached his furry ears and he braced himself. The sound died out to silence. Just as he opened his eyes, thinking the firework was a dud, boom! His rocket shot off the roof and sped straight up towards the sky. Baker was thrown back to the bottom of the can and waited there until the rocket slowed down. When he was finally able to move around again, he peeped his little eyes out of the bottom button holes. He couldn't believe what he saw. The rocket was surrounded by a deep blue sky and speckled with brilliant, sparkly lights. He spotted the big cheese coming closer and closer and getting bigger and bigger. It was larger than his mouse brain could have ever imagined. The rocket started knocking back and forth as things bumped loudly into it. Lights flashed past the buttonholes as Baker was tossed from side to side. The sides of the can were getting banged up and dented. Baker climbed his way to the hole and discovered he was going through a shower of shooting stars. He hung on tight, waiting for it to end. With a soft thump, the ship landed onto the big cheese. Baker slowly opened the door and stepped out. The surface was spongy with large holes all over the place. His nose was met with the most delightful smell and his mouth began to water. Baker knelt down and scooped up a small chunk of the cheese. He had waited his entire life for this moment. He raised the cheese up to his mouth and took a nibble. Okay, my last question for you readers is to put yourself in Baker's shoes. Okay? Now, what do you think after he landed on this big piece of cheese? What emotions do you think he's feeling here? Do you think he's happy? Do you think he's proud maybe that he landed on this big piece of cheese? Now he can save his neighborhood? Maybe he's upset. Maybe he could be frightened because maybe it was a scary journey. What do you think? Ooh, I hear a lot of great answers. I hear scared, excited. Ooh, I hear proud. Very good job. Let's find out. The big cheese ended up being Swiss cheese. Baker quickly gathered as much as he could stuff in the ship and returned home. His neighborhood was absolutely delighted, and Baker was named a hero. Not only was he a hero, he was the first ever mousetronaut to taste the big cheese. So it looks like we were maybe right that Baker was named a hero, so he was probably very excited that he landed on that piece of cheese. Okay, so I would like everybody to take out their writer's notebook, okay? And we're gonna do some writing. Okay, so after reading about Baker's journey, I would like you to write about a dream you have. How will you achieve that dream? Okay? All right, thank you.